Hello, in the previous videos we learned that if we use comparison operators, the result would be a boolean. Now let's talk about if statements. Sometimes you want to do a specific task based on a certain condition. In that case, you use if statement. So to do that, first we say if, then we will pass a boolean as the condition. Right here we say if eligible for transplant, then we use colon symbol and then we hit enter. It is going to give us a little space. This is called indentation in Python, which means when you use a statement, you need to give a space to any line of code that is a part of that statement. So we could say if it is eligible for transplant, we're gonna print you are eligible for transplant. Also, we could just get the age from the user using input. And as you remember, input returns a string, which we need to convert it to an integer. This is called casting. To cast the string to integer, as you remember, you use int and you put the string value inside parentheses. So now we get an age. And if the age is less than 50, we are going to set the value of eligible for transplant to true. And if the value of eligible for transplant is true, we're going to print you are eligible for transplant. Let's run this. It is going to ask how old are you? Let's say 30. And it says you are eligible for transplant. And if I run this again and enter a number like 60, you see nothing is happening. So in if statements, you could use else as well. So here we're gonna add an else and we use colon symbol. As you can see, else doesn't need to have indentation and we can print, sorry, you're not eligible for transplant. So now if I run this and enter 60 again, you see that it says, sorry, you're not eligible for transplant. So in if statements, you could also use else if to check multiple conditions for different scenarios. Else if comes between if and else. Now, as you can see, I used a variable, but you could directly place the condition right here. So instead of using a variable, let's just cut this and paste it here, and we can remove that variable. Now, if age is less than 50, you are eligible for transplant. Otherwise, you're not. Let's say you want to add another condition to check if the patient might be eligible for transplant if he is above 50 and less than 70, let's say. In order to do that, we could use else if. We say if, this is short for else if, then we're gonna write our condition. We use colon sign, and in this case, we say sorry, you are not eligible for transplant if your age is above 70. So if your age is less than 50, you are eligible. If your age is above 70, you are not. And else your age is between 50 and 70, you might be eligible for transplant. So this is how you could use if statement. By the way, you can add as many else if conditions as you want, but you only use one if and one else. Now, if I run this and add a number between 50 and 70, it says you might be eligible for transplant. We also have another type of conditional statement called match. So basically, we compare our variable against multiple different variables, and if it is a match, we are going to do a certain task. Let's say we ask the user for a name, and based on that name, we return an age. So first, we're going to ask the user, whose age do you want? And we're going to put the string value inside name. So to check the name variable against multiple different values, we write match followed by name and colon. Then for every value that we want to compare name with, we use a case. For example, if it is John, we're going to print he is 20 years old. Now let's say we want to check against another name. And in the case name is Mike, we're gonna print he is 50, and in the case the name is Sarah, we're gonna say she is 25. So you can add as many cases as you want, and to define a default state, you're gonna say case underline, If you do that, after it is going to check the name with all the cases, and if none of them is matched, then it's just gonna run whatever code is under the default case, which is this one. So let's run this. If, for example, I say Sarah, it says she is 25 years old. And if I run this, give it another name, let's say, for example, say Will, it says I don't know this person because Will is not inside any of the cases, so it's just gonna run the default case. So that's how you use match case. Now let's talk about loops. In the previous video, we learned about data collections like list. So this is a list of fruits. In order to go through every item inside this list, we could use for loop. So to do that, we say for, and we choose a name as item. You can choose any name you want. Let's just say F. And then we say in, then we're gonna pass the collection here, which is fruits. Then we're gonna add the colon sign, and then we're gonna use indentation. And let's just print F. So it's gonna loop through fruits and print every item inside that list. If I run this, you'll see that it is going to print every single item inside my list. Inside loops, you could use a line of code called break. So when you call break inside the loop, it's just gonna completely leave the loop. So here we say if our item equals to cherry, just break and don't print anything anymore. If I go ahead and run this, you'll see it's just gonna print banana because when it reaches cherry, it's just gonna break out of the loop. There is another option we could use, which is called continue. You could use this as well, but when you call continue, it's just gonna jump to the next item. So if I run this, you'll see that it's gonna print banana, but it's not gonna print cherry because we told him if you reached cherry, continue to the next item inside our list and ignore this one. Now let's talk about while loops. So we learned that we could use for loops for a data collections like list, but sometimes we want to loop based on a certain condition. So in order to use while loop, you write while followed by the condition, then you're gonna use colon sign, and let's say we want to print the number. First we define a number, then we're gonna say while, which means as long as number is greater than 0, print number. So there is a little problem with this because we need to create a situation that somewhere in the future number will be less or equal than 0, so our while loop could stop. Otherwise this is just gonna go forever. So I'm gonna say while number is greater than 0, print the number first, then number equals to number minus 1. And when we subtract 1 from the number, it will keep going down until it reaches 0. And when it reaches 0, this condition is no longer true and the loop is gonna stop. So if we run this, you'll see that it starts from 10 and then it's keep going to 1 and it stops. So basically we say while a condition is true, do something. And by the way, you could use break inside the while loop as well. So let's say we break from the loop whenever the number reaches 5. Now if I run this, you'll see that it stops printing when we actually reach 5. So that's basically the statements that we could use in our code to run different operations based on different conditions or just loop through a list of data. Now sometimes we want to do a task a few times and we don't want to repeat our code. In that case, we could use functions. So to create a function, we say def, short for define, and then we choose a name for our function. For example, let's just say my function, and we open and close parentheses. Then we're going to use colon sign, and then we write whatever we want inside the function with indentation. Now, functions are not going to get executed unless you call them. So if I run this right now, nothing happens. But if I call the function saying my function, You just have to write the name of the function and that's it. That's called calling the function. So if I run this now, it says hello from the function. And by the way, you cannot call a function before you define it, because if you do that, let's run this, you'll get an error. As I mentioned, in Python, code is going to be executed from top to bottom. So when you call a function right here, it's just going to say, I don't understand, I don't have a function with this name. But if you call it after you define the function, then it's going to come from top to bottom, and first it's going to read the function. Now he knows the function. And now if you call it, it's going to execute every code inside the function. You can pass variables to functions. All you have to do is define your variables inside the parentheses of the function. For example, let's say I want to pass a name to this function whenever I call it. So now if I run this, it's going to give me an error saying that one argument is missing. So I need to pass something when I call the function. So let's say instead of hello from the function, I'm going to say hello plus name. And when I call the function, I'm going to pass a name. Now if I run this, it says hello John. Now I can use this function multiple times for different names. Now let's run this. You see hello John, hello Sarah. And if you want to pass multiple variables to the function, you can just separate them with a comma sign. And just like that, you could avoid repeating yourself by just defining a function and make your code more organized. So here I'm going to pass also the age, and here also we're going to pass the age with a comma sign. And if the age is integer, we're passing integer, so function will receive an integer for age. And as I mentioned that before, you need to convert it. Also the term for it is casting. We're going to cast it to a string using str. Now if I run this, you see hello John, you are 30 years old. And the same thing for Sarah. So that's it for now. Feel free to ask me any questions. The link for the Discord is in the description. You could also send me an email. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.